Mother-in-law ignored me throughout my pregnancy because I conceived before marriage, unlike her darling Dil, who was pregnant at the same time and married. But the day Sil gave birth, Mill called us crying, regretting her treatment of me. I didn't understand why until I found out Sil's baby doesn't even belong to Bill. My husband, Rob, and I have been distant from my mother-in-law for the past few months, and, honestly, it's been for good reason. Throughout my pregnancy, she has deliberately made things harder for me during what should have been one of the happiest times of my life. You see, from the moment I entered my husband's life, it has always felt like I was competing in some unspoken race against both his mother and sister. Rob's father passed away when he was still quite young. And because of that, my husband, his sister, and their mom have an incredibly tight bond. When Rob and I first started dating, he warned me that his family was very protective of him. At the time, I thought, okay, that's fine, I can handle that. But nothing, absolutely nothing could have prepared me for what it was like to actually meet them and be drawn into their world. Mother-in-law and sister-in-law were particularly nasty to me from the very first meeting. Mother-in-law, in particular, went out of her way to assert her dominance in our relationship. She made it blatantly clear that she would always come first in Rob's life and that I was always going to be second or maybe even third. Whenever Rob and I were going to pick her up or drop her off somewhere, she would demand that I get out of the passenger seat so that she could sit there instead. She acted like she was his wife or something. She wanted to sit next to Rob and make sure I knew my place, which according to her was in the back seat. It didn't stop there. On occasions like my birthday or Christmas, if Rob gave me something thoughtful or expensive, mother-in-law would immediately demand something equally expensive for herself. She insisted that as his mother, she deserved even more attention and respect than I did. And then there were her nightly video calls to Rob. Every night like clockwork at 10 p.m., she would video call Rob and insist on talking to him for an hour regardless of how busy or tired he was after his day. If Rob didn't pick up, she would keep calling him incessantly until he would have to give in. It didn't matter if he had work to do or needed some downtime. She expected his undivided attention. Whenever Rob tried to include me in the conversation during these calls, her reaction was, "I see." She would ignore me completely and refuse to listen to me. It felt like every interaction with her was a not-so-subtle power play, reminding me that she wasn't ready to let Rob go or let me have a significant role in his life. As you can imagine, I quickly reached my breaking point with my mother-in-law's ridiculous and hurtful behavior. Her blatant disrespect was taking a toll on me in our relationship. I finally sat Rob down and made it clear, if he didn't talk to his mother and put an end to her toxic behavior, I couldn't continue our relationship. I wasn't asking for much, just basic respect and boundaries. Thankfully, Rob understood where I was coming from. He took my concerns seriously and had a firm conversation with his mother. She obviously refuted all claims and tried to turn it back on me. But Rob stood firmly in my support. Since that talk, Rob had maintained strong boundaries with his mom. He has made it clear that I am his priority and that our relationship comes first. While that has been a huge relief for me, it has had the opposite effect on my mother-in-law. She resents me even more for it. Clearly, she thinks I'm taking her son away from her or something. When Rob proposed to me, things escalated further. Instead of being happy for him, mother-in-law and sister-in-law tried everything they could to convince him to break things off with me. They focused a lot on our different ethnicities as a reason, claiming that I wasn't the right fit for their family. They didn't just stop there. They even went so far as to argue with Rob about our future children, saying things like, "What if the babies have her skin color? That won't look good. What will people think of us?" It was appalling to hear them talk about me and potential children in such a shallow and prejudiced way. They also made a big deal about my cultural background, claiming that my poor upbringing would somehow be a bad influence on how our children would be raised. To them, the idea of having someone from a different culture in their family was totally unacceptable. I guess this must be how they had always felt about me. And now that Rob had proposed, they were finally opening up and trying to get him to break up with me. But their arguments backfired. The more they tried to attack me and our relationship, the angrier Rob became. He stood his ground and let them know he wouldn't tolerate such behavior from them. He told mother-in-law and sister-in-law in no uncertain terms that he didn't care about their opinions on ethnicity, skin color, or culture. He made it clear that if they couldn't accept me for who I was, he was prepared to cut them out of his life entirely. This resulted in more arguments, but ultimately, there was nothing that mother-in-law and sister-in-law could do further. I was offended too. Who were they to judge me, my background, or what our future children might look like when my own partner, the person who mattered most, had absolutely no issues with any of it? Rob loved me for who I was, and he valued everything I brought to our relationship. Why couldn't his family do the same? I made it clear to Rob that his family was crossing the line constantly. My family, on the other hand, had been nothing but warm and welcoming to Rob. They accepted him wholeheartedly from the very beginning and treated him as if he were their own son. They didn't see our differences as a problem. They saw them as something to celebrate. Rob apologized to me sincerely and deeply. He was truly sorry for how his family acted. And he made a decision that he and I would go low contact with mother-in-law and sister-in-law from that point forward. I was really pleasantly surprised by how firm he was in his decision. Clearly, he wasn't going to let his family disrespect me in any way. He basically stopped initiating conversations, refused to visit them, and essentially distanced himself from their negativity. Mother-in-law and sister-in-law attempted to reach out to me, likely hoping to smooth things over or at least make it seem like they were making an effort. But I wasn't interested in their apologies, so I simply ignored their calls, their messages, and any attempts they made to involve me. Just 2 months before our wedding, I found out I was pregnant. It came as a complete surprise because Rob and I had been using protection, but life has its way of throwing curveballs. When I shared the news with my family, they were overjoyed. They couldn't wait to welcome the baby and were already talking about how exciting it would be to have a little one joining the family. Their excitement made me feel so loved and supported. Unfortunately, Rob's mother and sister had the exact opposite reaction. Instead of happiness, they were furious. It turned out the sister-in-law was also pregnant and had been looking forward to being the only one in the family expecting a child this year. She started going around the rest of the family accusing me of intentionally getting pregnant to one-up her. The idea was so ridiculous and hurtful. How could she even think that I would intentionally plan something so life-changing just to steal her spotlight? As if that wasn't bad enough, mother-in-law had her own set of complaints. She was angry that I got pregnant before the wedding. She sent me several angry voicemails about how we should have waited until after we were married to have a child, calling our situation unholy. She claimed that Rob and I had embarrassed her in front of her family by conceiving before marriage, pointing out that sister-in-law who was pregnant too was already married and therefore doing things the right way. Mother-in-law even insisted that we delay announcing the pregnancy until after the wedding. She said it was to avoid people outside the family from looking down on the baby, but I knew it was really about her trying to preserve her own image and pride. I couldn't believe the nerve of them. Rob and I were literally getting married soon. We were building a life together, and whether our child arrived before or after the wedding shouldn't have mattered at all. We loved each other deeply and were committed to one another for the long haul. Instead of celebrating the fact that another grandchild was on the way, mother-in-law was obsessing over appearances, and sister-in-law was treating the whole situation like a competition. It was disheartening and exhausting. In the 2 leading up to the wedding, neither mother-in-law nor sister-in-law apologized to me for their behavior. They never even tried to check in on me or the baby, not even once. I know we weren't close to begin with, but I thought they might at least show some basic decency or courtesy. A simple text asking how I was doing would have gone a long way, but there was nothing. When it came time to send out our wedding invitations, Rob and I were torn about whether to include his mother and sister. After everything they had said and done, it didn't feel like they deserved to be part of such an important day in our lives. However, Rob doesn't have a large family aside from his mother, sister, and a few cousins, and I didn't want him to feel isolated or sad during our wedding. As much as I wanted to cut them out, I decided it was more important to make sure Rob had the support of the family he did have. So we sent them invitations, but not without conditions. Rob firmly told his mother and sister that they needed to behave themselves and not cause any drama during our wedding. When the big day arrived, mother-in-law and sister-in-law did show up, but they clearly wanted to make a statement of their own. Both of them wore black dresses, as if they were attending a funeral instead of celebrating our marriage. It was hard not to feel hurt, but I decided not to give them the satisfaction of showing it. They completely ignored my family, barely acknowledging anyone on my side, and didn't take a single picture with me. Instead, they posed only with Rob and stuck together throughout the entire event. It was as if I didn't exist to them. Their behavior was cold and dismissive, but honestly, I chose not to let it ruin my day. I focused on what mattered, celebrating my love for Rob and the beautiful future we were building together. Surrounded by my family and friends, I was having an amazing time anyways. Since the wedding, Rob and I have been busy settling into our lives. Between setting up our home and preparing for the baby's arrival, we haven't had the time or the energy to go out of our way to nurture a relationship with mother-in-law and sister-in-law. And, honestly, we don't feel the need to. After everything that's happened, we've realized that keeping our distance is what's best for us. We've chosen to prioritize each other, our growing family, and the people who truly support us, and that decision has brought us a lot of peace. Yesterday, I had a conversation with one of Rob's cousins that left me feeling really upset. She told me how Rob seemed to have gone distant after marrying me. She insinuated that I was somehow to be blamed for the strained relationship between Rob and his family. According to her, mother-in-law and sister-in-law have also been going around telling people that I'm the reason Rob doesn't want anything to do with him anymore. They've been painting me as this controlling wife who is keeping him away from his family. Hearing this broke my heart because it couldn't be further from the truth. I've never had an issue with who Rob interacts with or maintains relationships with. It's his choice. I've always respected that, but the reality is it's not me who's caused this distance. It's mother-in-law and sister-in-law. From the very beginning, they've been unpleasant, unkind, and unwilling to accept me into their lives. Their actions have made me feel like an outsider, and they've shown no willingness to treat me with basic respect. The cousin went on to suggest that I should probably reach out to mother-in-law and sister-in-law and give them another chance. She said that with sister-in-law's baby coming soon and also my baby arriving next, it's important for us all to be closer as a family. I understand the sentiment behind her suggestion, but it feels so unfair to me. Why should I be the one to reach out when they're the ones who've crossed boundaries time and time again? They've dismissed me, disrespected me, and spread hurtful lies about me, yet I'm the one being asked to make the effort? It kind of feels exhausting and one-sided. At the same time, I don't want to unnecessarily estrange Rob from his family. The only reason he has low contact with his family is because of me. But at the end of the day, he does love them, even if their behavior has made things difficult for us, and I never want to stand in the way of that bond. I feel like I'm stuck between wanting to protect myself from further hurt and not wanting to come between Rob and his family. AITA. Update 1. Thank you so much to everyone for your supportive comments. It honestly means the world to me to know that people are understanding and kind about everything I've been going through. It really breaks my heart to read that so many of you have gone through similar situations with your mother-in-laws and sister-in-laws. I never realized how common this type of family drama is, but hearing your stories has made me feel less alone in all this. I can truly empathize with all of you who've had to deal with toxic family dynamics, and I'm grateful to everyone who has shared their stories with me. After reading the comments, I feel even more confident in my decision to continue keeping low contact with mother-in-law and sister-in-law. It's clear that they are toxic people, and I just don't want that kind of negativity or drama in my life anymore. I've already been through so much with them, and I don't want to keep putting myself in a position where I'm constantly feeling hurt, disrespected, and drained by their actions. Right now, I'm pregnant and already dealing with a lot, so the last thing I need is to have additional stress or drama added to my life. But I still plan to have a talk with Rob about what his cousin told me. I want to make sure he knows what's going on with sister-in-law and how I'm feeling about it. We've always tried to make decisions together, and this is no exception. Update 2. It's been a while since I last updated. Yesterday, we got some unexpected news. Sister-in-law was taken to the hospital because her water broke. Even though Rob hasn't been in touch with his sister for months, he put all the differences aside and gave her a call to wish her good luck and show support. Unfortunately, she didn't pick up or respond. We decided not to disturb her further and just hoped that everything would go smoothly for her and the baby. A few hours later, our phone started ringing. It was mother-in-law. Rob picked up, and right away, she sounded agitated. It turns out the sister-in-law's baby doesn't resemble her or her husband at all, and this has sparked confusion and suspicion. Without going into too much detail, the baby has a completely different skin tone and physical features from both parents, which has naturally raised eyebrows. Sister-in-law's husband was the first to voice his doubts. He questioned sister-in-law directly, but she kept insisting that the baby was his and tried to dismiss his concerns. However, her reassurances didn't seem to convince him or the rest of the family who had to come and visit. Things escalated quickly after that. Sister-in-law's husband has now decided to get a DNA test to confirm his suspicions. We'll update next when the results are out. Update 3. Okay, it's been a few days now, and the results are finally out. It has been revealed that the baby does not belong to sister-in-law's husband. After this came to light, sister-in-law had no choice but to finally come clean. She admitted to her husband and mother-in-law that she had been having an extramarital affair with a co-worker for months. She tried to justify it by saying that the affair had ended after she found out she was pregnant. According to her, she generally believed the baby was her husband since she was also intimate with him and had no idea it might belong to the other guy. As you can imagine, this revelation has caused a massive rift in sister-in-law's marriage and within the family. Her husband is furious and has outright refused to accept the child as his own and demanded that both sister-in-law and the baby leave his house immediately. I guess it's a good thing that he got the DNA test done. Otherwise, sister-in-law would have kept gaslighting him into accepting the baby. Mother-in-law, who had always been vocal about morality and family image, was equally distraught that her daughter could do such a stupid thing. Out of desperation, she reached out to Rob for help. She explained that she was deeply worried about sister-in-law, who was now facing life as a single mother and basically homeless, also since her husband asked her to move out. Mother-in-law kept trying to convince Rob to talk to sister-in-law's husband so as to get him to forgive sister-in-law and also accept the baby. Mother-in-law seemed to believe that Rob might be able to mediate and smooth things over somehow. Rob, however, stood firm. He told his mother in no uncertain terms that he would not get involved in this situation. He made it clear that sister-in-law's choices had led to these consequences and that it wasn't fair to expect her husband to shoulder the burden of raising another man's child. Rob also pointed out that sister-in-law should be looking to the baby's biological father, her affair partner, for support, not trying to force her husband to take responsibility for a child that isn't his. As if this isn't enough, now mother-in-law has been reaching out to me. Out of nowhere, she started apologizing for everything. Something I never thought I'd hear from her. She's told me that she regrets how she has treated me all this time and wants to meet up to fix things between us. Honestly, I feel completely thrown off by this sudden shift in her behavior, especially since she's never spoken to me so kindly before. Up until now, mother-in-law has always been dismissive and even mean towards me. She's made me feel like an outsider and treated me as if I was beneath her in many ways. Her words have always been sharp and her actions more so. So this sudden change in tone is really confusing. It's hard to know if her apology is genuine or if it's just a way for her to cover up the mess she's now facing with sister-in-law and her family. I am sure she's embarrassed by her daughter and is probably turning to me for some kind of help. I don't know whether I should actually agree to meet with her or if it's better to keep my distance. I feel like she's just embarrassed by her daughter and is probably turning to me for some kind of help. Part of me feels like I should stay open-minded and give her a chance to show if she's really changed, while the other part is worried that this is just another way for her to manipulate the situation to her advantage. It's a tough decision, and I'm not sure where to go from here. Update 4. I've been reading everyone's comments since last night, and I think some of you are right. This sudden change in mother-in-law's behavior has everything to do with sister-in-law and the baby. First off, mother-in-law is clearly embarrassed by everything that's happened. The truth about sister-in-law cheating and ending up with another man's child is slowly coming out in front of the rest of the family. And mother-in-law knows that it will bring shame to the family. She's been doing everything she can to protect her daughter, even though sister-in-law's actions have been completely irresponsible. Mother-in-law is clearly worried about the public perception and what people will think once they find out the truth. That is why she's been reaching out to us asking for support. She wants Rob and I to come together as a family and present a united front so that they can try to navigate this mess with sister-in-law. She's trying to get us to back sister-in-law and support her through this difficult time, even though it was sister-in-law's own choices that led her here. Mother-in-law's talking about how we need to be there for sister-in-law, especially since she's now going to be a single mom to her poor baby. Mother-in-law wants Rob and me to start financially supporting sister-in-law since she has no one else to turn to. As you know, sister-in-law has always been a stay-at-home wife, so she's jobless now and doesn't have any source of income. With her lack of work experience, I doubt she'll ever be able to find a decent job out there. And because of her affair, she won't be getting alimony from her ex-husband. I'm not sure if she ever plans to go after child support from the affair partner. But even if she does, I doubt it will be enough to cover her expenses in any way. For the time being, sister-in-law is moving in with mother-in-law. However, mother-in-law doesn't have enough money to support both her daughter and the baby, especially with all the added costs of raising a child. This is where she's turning to Rob and me for help. She's essentially asking us to give them money every month to cover these new expenses. She's hoping that we'll agree to take on some of the financial burden, which is frustrating because we've already dealt with so much from her and sister-in-law. This is extremely unfair, and I feel like mother-in-law is trying to shift the responsibility onto us. I'm feeling a lot of pressure because while I care about Rob's family and want to help where I can, this feels like an unfair request. It's hard to know how to handle it, especially when everything feels so one-sided and complicated. Lastly, mother-in-law is deeply religious, and I think that plays a huge role in how she's responding to all of this. She's extremely offended by sister-in-law's actions, particularly the affair and having a child that doesn't belong to her husband. While I did conceive before my wedding, at least my child is with my rightful husband, unlike sister-in-law's situation. I think this contrast is important to mother-in-law because her faith and beliefs are central to how she views family and what's right in her eyes. The whole situation with sister-in-law goes against her values, and I can see how that's created a huge rift between them. I really think this is why mother-in-law has been reaching out to me and asking for forgiveness. I'm not sure she truly feels remorse for how she's treated me or if her apology is more about wanting to repair her image in front of the rest of the family. By asking for my forgiveness, she likely sees this as an opportunity to be involved in our child's life. Update 5. Hi, guys. Thank you to everyone for reaching out and checking in on me these last few days. I really appreciate all the love and support I've been receiving. It means a lot to know that people care, especially during such a confusing and stressful time. I just want to let everyone know that Rob and I have had a serious conversation about everything that's been going on, and after discussing it, we've made a decision together. Despite mother-in-law's apologies and her attempts to make things right, we've decided that we still want to maintain only low contact with her and sister-in-law. It's clear that she and sister-in-law can't be fully trusted after everything that's happened, and we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're constantly dealing with their negativity or manipulation. Rob will continue to help them out when needed, but we haven't promised them any financial support. After all, we have our lives to think about first. I'm really glad that my husband is standing by me in all of this and has my back. It's comforting to know we're on the same page in making these decisions together even though they're not easy. As for sister-in-law, Rob's cousin has told us that she's been struggling with depression and seeking therapies since moving out of her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband's house. While I do feel some sadness for her and her baby's situation, I also have to remind myself that she's facing the consequences of her own actions. She's reaping what she sowed, and unfortunately, the choices she made have led her to this point. I still hope she can find the help she needs and get better for the sake of her child. It's a tough situation. I do wish the best for her, but at the end of the day, she has to own up to her mistakes and work through them on her own. Update 6. It's been a few months since my last update, and I'm happy to say that I've finally given birth. Yay! It's been such an exhausting journey. Parenthood is no joke. I'm absolutely in awe of how much care and attention a baby requires, and there are moments when I'm completely wiped out. But at the same time, Rob and I are so happy. We've been enjoying every little moment with our baby, and despite the exhaustion, it's truly a blessing to see our family grow. As I mentioned before, my family has been incredibly supportive throughout this whole process. They've been there for me every step of the way, helping out whenever they can and offering emotional support, which has meant so much to me. They've truly been a rock for us. As for our mother-in-law and sister-in-law, we are still maintaining low contact with them. From what I've heard, sister-in-law is doing much better and has finally found a job at a diner that will help her take care of her baby. Despite all the drama and hurt that's happened, I do still want them to be a part of my child's life. Just not right now. I think it would take time for everyone to heal and figure out how to move forward. Right now, Rob and I are focusing on our baby and settling into our new lives as parents.